Hey, everybody.
Hello.
I need to
Hey,
set up the live stream. Live on Facebook.
Kate, I'm so sad that I missed you yesterday.
I know, it was a spur of the moment kind of thing. But yeah, I'll be back. I love this space. It's so cute.
It's really cute. It's adorable.
Oh, we get special new pictures hanging now.
Mm-hmm.
And you're about to get some cool rugs.
Very excited.
They're really nice. It's just like, it's super cozy. My one question is, are we going to have a cleaning service?
Yes.
Oh, that's even more exciting.
It's at least it's supposed to come with the space.
I think between Amber and I, we try to keep it pretty clean.
No, definitely. I just was...
Hello?
How many cups of coffee do you go through a day?
Quite a lot, actually.
Yeah, the other day, yesterday, Amber saw the trash. She's like, there's like 4 Keurig cups.
Oh my God.
Well, Steven drinks a lot, too.
Yeah.
I love that Steven's working on stuff. He's going to be so prepared for his first day of college.
I think it's so funny. He came into the office when I was up in Manassas. I thought it was so cute. All right, we are going to go live. We're doing it.
Is Ted joining us?
Yeah, eventually.
Okay.
Usually I get a text about this time saying that he's putting on his pantaloons.
He likes to come. I've noticed he likes to come in with like a real presence. So he also has to prep for, the music.
Yeah, you gotta upload that.
Yeah, so
get that ready.
It takes
Absolutely.
time. I'll share it on Facebook.
I'm trying to do a watch party side by side.
It's pretty easy.
You would think. You would think, Kate. I appreciate the vote of confidence there, but.
So I'm not going to take credit for it, but I had this pretty cool, I was talking to my mom about because she's been watching these, and she was a former educator, Lauren, so she was like, you guys should maybe she's like, what if you guys did a webinar speaking to peers or, siblings, and where, you're talking about, you're not the teacher, but what's the appropriate modeling behavior for your friends or your siblings? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For those students that go into general ed setting, or, even go to PE or whatnot, it's when something inappropriate happens, our natural reaction is to laugh. But is that
what
appropriate?
should we be doing?
What?
How'd you do the watch party thing? Walk me through it, Kate.
Oh my God.
Are we still on this?
Yes, we are. Okay, so I'll go to my Facebook.
Lauren, do you know how to do a watch party?
Yeah. I did one last week twice. I've done 2 for you.
So you're just going to go to the video, and there's going to be a little purple thing that says, there's a little purple thing that says watch together with friends or with group. And you're like, start.
Where's the video at?
Okay. Go to the website. Go to evidence.
Oh, I found it. Okay, purple thing. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then it'll start streaming.
Press start. Now.
That's not an option. I have going or view event.
Okay, so you maybe need to click on the icon below and put it on your personal. I love seeing the time delay because I'm seeing my faces right now.
It's really odd to see.
Do I have to share it? Hit share? Watch party? Maybe?
Nope.
Have a watch party.
Start watch party.
Start. Yep, there we go.
Yep.
Did it work?
Let's see.
Yep, it does say that evidence-based classroom is live now. I see that Kate started a watch party.
I think because I did on my personal one, he's doing it. He's not changing from his from the company page to his personal page. So we have
So
like,
that's a huge problem. And if somebody can figure out how to solve that problem for me, I would be like
okay,
all
okay.
about it.
Can I share my screen on this?
Huh?
Can I share my screen? I don't even
Maybe
care.
next time we should figure this out before we go
No,
live.
I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Hey everyone,
Sure,
I'm gonna see- everyone's gonna see the Facebook. Woohoo! Welcome to Kate's Facebook, everybody. Okay, so are you watching?
I
Eyes
am
up-
watching it.
Eyes
Yeah,
up here.
I'm watching.
Okay. Evidence-based classroom solutions. So I'm gonna scroll down, right?
Oh, look, we see the live of what's happening.
Everything. It's really.
Do you do this on the computer you're working, like you're zooming on right now?
I do it.
I
from
do it on
phone.
my phone.
Yeah, I do it on my phone. But so you're
Okay.
doing it from the computer. But oh wait, no, eyes back
From
up
my
here.
iPad.
Eyes up here.
Okay, I'm looking.
So you see this little thing right here?
Uh-huh.
I can click on Kate Elizabeth, and now it becomes, it's no longer representing EBCS, but my personal page.
Okay, but I'm on my personal page right now. I am on my personal page.
Okay, but you can do that and it can switch to EBCS.
Yeah.
Like if you hit the down arrow, it'll switch.
Oh my gosh.
Do I need to switch it to do the watch party?
Yes. Because we're going live on EBCS.
EBCS can hold its own watch party.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Yes, please.
This is social skills, y'all.
If there's
Any word from
anyone out,
Katie?
if there's anyone out there listening that maybe wants to do like a tech skills for one person, let us know.
I mean, I think we can all benefit from tech skills. Like
Yes,
no one's, yeah. In the
sure.
world we live in, it's always good.
I am literally on my Facebook
Good morning.
page. I am on my Facebook page.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
I like the. It's important.
Oh man, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. It'll be
Are
fine.
we on? Oh, we're on Chad's personal Facebook.
No,
I mean,
no, I'm just trying to start a watch party on my Facebook page. That's all I'm trying to do. And I'm getting a lot of sass.
All I have to say is that, Chad, you're doing a fantastic job starting watch parties on Facebook.
Yeah, you started the whole trend for
Mhm.
us. And
10 out of 10.
Yeah.
I feel like it shouldn't be as hard as it is. So
It's not.
Are we on Facebook now? Are we?
We are.
supposedly, Ted, I've been trying to start a watch party, but I've been getting quite the amount of.
I mean, it
Critique.
says we're live on Facebook.
Let's take latency
I'm
data.
trying to start a watch party on my Facebook page.
Let's take latency data. Ted,
Mm.
you're on Facebook Live. Go. How much
Okay. Hold on. Hold on.
to begin this response?
I'm typing in a message. Watch this.
Oh, is it?
Dang
Yeah.
it. Ruined my latency data.
Okay, my watch party's going.
That took less than.
That was fast.
All I'm asking is how you do it. That's all I'm asking.
I click on the thing that says start. That's my watch party.
Mm.
And then if I want to type something, I type something, and then I click go, and then it goes.
Thank you, Ted.
Love
You're
this.
welcome. I know it's difficult.
All right. Whenever I click the watch party, all I get is
Sass.
a search. Yeah, SAS for one thing, but
That's
the
what we're
search,
good at.
like the video's not there on my Facebook page. So that's the problem.
Okay.
It might be because
Yes.
we're admin on the page or something.
That's it. That's the problem.
Is that
Is
the
Amber
problem?
there? Is Amber in the office?
Yeah, she's
She would figure this stuff. She would know how to do that, probably.
Amber's also on the live
And
on my
so
watch
far,
party.
Oh,
I
she's-
watch party.
Yeah, she's live on the watch party. She's probably laughing at all
Wait.
this. So.
On my watch party,
This
I have
professional
someone from
conversation.
California, someone in Northern Ireland, and someone in Culpeper, Virginia.
That is
Oh my-
so cool. I really wish I could achieve that level of
Awesome.
Well, hello from North Carolina to Ireland. And
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
My friend in
Very-
Culpeper has
I wonder if
also been
it's
doing
my
a watch
mother in
party.
North Carolina.
cool.
Because I told her to watch.
Yes. My parents have been watching. I don't know if they heard this morning, but they usually text me.
Just out of curiosity, when you hit Watch Party, does it come up with a search for different videos?
No.
That's what happens when I hit Watch Party. It comes up and I have to search
Well-
for videos, and the only ones I can find are recorded ones.
Are you hitting it the right way?
I don't know, because every time I get directions, I get very, very non-good, undesirable
Good.
social direction, social
Okay, no,
skills.
Kate gave you really good direct. Hers were very clear.
It was.
Sorry. I first
Can we
started
do a
most of
task
these.
analysis of
I'm,
this?
no,
Yes,
I did most
break
of
it
the
down.
prompting. I first started with verbal. That was
Mhm.
enough. So then I went into visual in addition to
Right.
my verbal. This
Maybe
doesn't
we
sound like this doesn't sound like a help problem. This sounds like a individual.
Okay, so let's break
We
it
can
down. 'cause
model
this is
it
good-
later.
This is good social skill stuff. Where do I hit the Watch Party button? Very specific question.
Bottom left, it'll be a purple button that says Watch Party. It's got a little popcorn.
I understand that. There is no bottom left purple button. I don't have the video. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
The button's not purple. It's next to an icon that is purple, where then you press start. The reason why you may not see it
Amber says she's cracking up.
is because you are still on as an admin for EBCS instead
Yeah.
of on your personal page.
I'm on my personal page and not on the
No.
EBCS page.
No, on your personal page, there's not going to be a video because you haven't shared it yet. I hope everyone
We're
is
talking
listening
about social
to my
skills, people.
tone.
We have a very special guest named Lauren Ross, our speech pathologist. I'm going to let them talk for a moment while I try to figure this out.
Lauren, has my tone improved that it seems less judgy?
Oh, man.
Well, when you say that, your tone was that you had a very flat affect and flat intonation, which oftentimes is a judgy tone. But
Yeah, there's been a lot of
maybe if
judgy
you
tone.
could put more inflection and
Okay, let me try.
Lots of
Lauren,
judgy tone.
have you noticed the change in my tone
there
That
we
was
go.
beautiful. That was very nice.
That was
as I sip
beautiful.
on
Yeah.
some tea?
That's the tea.
Hmm.
So,
Do I need
Lauren,
to
why
introduce-
do we have a speech pathologist on for today?
That's a great question. I was asked to be here. But well, social skills really relate and they tie in and to a lot of things that speech therapy work on. Receptive language, expressive language, written modalities are all things that tie into social skills, especially pragmatics. And all of that interconnects. And I think it's really important when we're talking about social skills to have a speech input.
Okay.
NAFTA has really great guidelines for it. And I printed out actually the social communication benchmarks
Yes.
are
So Lauren,
I know, love it.
So Lauren, I honestly, when I first went into teaching, and it wasn't until like I started my behavior coursework that I had heard of pragmatics and whatnot, but I had no idea what it was because they're like, oh, it's speech. So
Yeah.
can you clarify for any of the teachers out there that maybe were just like me and they're like, they've told me it's just speech, so I don't need to think about it. Can you explain like the big fancy terms? Like we have pragmatic. What's another term that's often used?
Reflexive language? I don't...
I'm just thinking of like, so, you know, like when they identify an individual for SLI or for speech
Yes.
deficits, they can either say it was a deficit like in pragmatics or.
So according to Virginia, you cannot be identified for SLI under the category of pragmatics. That's not
Oh,
a fact.
there you go. So educate me, please.
So this is a really touchy kind of subject. And I mean, I've had many heated debates with other speech therapists about this. So under the disability category of SLI in Virginia, you have articulation, receptive expressive, stuttering, I'm trying to think of voice, I'm going through right now. I'm sure.
Articulation was the word I was thinking.
Yeah. I was like, what other words could there be that are linked to pragmatics? And so one thing that we run into a lot is when we have a child who is showing average language ability and average articulation ability, they're not stuttering, we're not having a voice issue. Schools generally do not work with any swallowing deficits. So
Right.
that will rarely be in, at least in Virginia, I don't know about other states. But pragmatics is where we get tricky because parents will say, well, they're not engaging and they don't have those friend groups that we want them to. And this is something that therapy can work on. But if you're looking directly at the category of SLI, it doesn't fall as a deficit level, which is I don't feel is appropriate because it's within our realm to work on and to practice with. And I think a lot of people could benefit if they had.
Well, and because, you know, like we then start to see that, and correct me if I'm wrong, everybody, but we start to go into that gray area of like that pragmatic deficit that you're talking about, and then a deficit that's within autism, you know, like that interaction, that communication. So I don't know, like who does the services? You know what I mean? Like that was always a question I had. It was like, who does this?
Lauren, you can, for other disability categories though, you can have pragmatic goals.
Yes,
correct.
Yeah.
So it's that SLI that you can't.
Yes. And oftentimes what I would do is link a pragmatic goal with a language goal, kind of intertwine them. I know Katie and Chad, I think we both all wrote goals together that had those characteristics that we could target both expressive and receptive language and pragmatics.
Luckily, when I first started teaching, I had Chad and Lauren. So we were doing the collaborative model from the get-go. So I think I had a different experience than most like first-year teachers.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was. And I got to see it kind of in action when I was an assistant, like before I was a teacher. So luckily I never kind of questioned that. It was just something we both tagged ourselves on and we both took data on and it was beautiful. So.
Yeah. And I think to effectively run any goal that's targeting social skills, you have to do more than just speech therapy.
Right.
And it's got to be the teacher. You've got to have the IAs in it. I mean, I've even had the occupational therapists come in and we're all working on the goal because that's how you're going to get carryover. I know, Ted, yesterday you had a goal that you were working on.
Oh, I wasn't working on it. It was read off.
I think I was complaining about it.
Yeah, parents were expected to sign this thing. And I don't have it in front of, actually, no, I'm not going to read it. I don't have it in front of me right now, but it was something like the student will identify, what, do you have it in front of you, Chad?
Oh, I've actually got it as a text.
In a text, yeah.
Yeah, read it, please. Read it.
Okay, hold on. It's on our big group chat. Do you want to say the original goal or the goal that you changed it to?
The original goal.
Okay. The student will identify his role and responsibility in a situation with a peer or an adult by displaying appropriate reactions and responses to his own behavior in 90% of observable occasions.
What the hell is that? What does that mean?
That's a lot.
I don't even know how to meet that goal.
Is it an objective to identify? Is it an objective to react? Or is it an objective to have appropriate responses? And when I asked, no one could explain that. So they just reread it. And I said, I'm still not understanding this. I'm kind of smart. It just makes no sense. What do you want me to do? And then they just read it again. So we talked about it for a while. And what we got down to was, Lauren, do you want to read that one, please?
Yeah, that was a nice cue up. The student will exercise effective self-management behavior in difficult situations with 90% of observed situations.
Okay, that's better. Now, we're defining what we know what the self-management skills are that we're teaching him. And what a lot of people don't get is self-management. Skinner said it was actually 2 behaviors. Far be it from me to correct Skinner, but I think it's 3. Because it's the behavior that needs to be managed, it's the behavior that manages that behavior, but it's also awareness. Awareness is a behavior. It's awareness that this behavior is happening, and so now it's time to do this thing. Now, later on, you don't need that awareness. This just becomes discriminative for that, but you need that awareness short term or someone telling you time to do this. Right. So, you know, this is what self-management is. This is what a lot of the pragmatics are that you're talking about. And in verbal behavior terms, the pragmatics, what they actually are is autoclitic behavior.
Yes.
It's what we do when we're on the point of saying things that kind of is partly under control of audience variables and under control of a lot of other things that gets it to come out the way it comes out. You know, what we have to say we say for one reason. But how we say as a function of what we have to say, and then all this autoclitic stuff we're doing.
Yeah.
And so the pragmatics is autoclitic behavior. And that behavior analysts can teach very well if they understand what it is. Another difficulty, though, is that you mention expressive language and receptive language.
Yes.
And as good behavior analysts, no such thing. No such thing. Because to express, think about this.
I'm
Here we
having
go.
flashbacks
Here we
to
go.
Drive Down the Green.
Let the fun begin, ladies
Yep.
and gentlemen.
This
Let
is
the
where-
fun begin.
Something means you're taking the thing from here and you're putting it here. Think about like when, and the only time I've heard the word express used in this way is like expressing pus from a pimple or blister, or expressing milk. A woman who's, nursing and it's in between, it's time to milk, and, she's expressing milk. It's going from one location to another, and it's there. It's a static thing that's there. And then receptive. It was there, but I gave it to you, and now you have it. This presumes that language is a thing. It's not a thing. Verbal behavior is something we do. Verbal behavior is saying stuff, thinking stuff, feeling stuff, not feeling stuff, saying, thinking, a lot of dreaming, a lot of imagining, a lot of reading, writing, signing, PECs. All of this is verbal behavior. And what it requires is a speaker and a listener. And sometimes we're both speaker and listener. But what we get with a lot of kids with disabilities, and even a lot of kids and adults without, is really deficient autoclitic behavior as a speaker, and great difficulty in adjusting their own behavior in response to autoclitic behavior that's coming from another speaker when they're the listener. They just don't get it. And so it needs to be taught. But it's difficult to teach when you pretend that it's a thing that you can just give someone and then they have it, like the rake and the weed whacker in my shed in the backyard that I can just take out and use whenever I need them. Over.
So Ted, can you give a good example of, because I think it's something that gets confused a lot, of autoclitic language, a kid using autoclitic.
It's not autoclitic language, it's autoclitic behavior. And I could say, Chad is the boss at EBCS. Or I could say,
Except
Chad,
you can't start a watch party.
okay, or I could say, Chad is the boss at EBCS with these air quotes. That sort of changes the meaning of it, doesn't it? Or I could, whisper it if there's someone else over there and I gotta say it, but that's audience control, and I don't want that person to hear it, but that person has to hear it. I can say Chad is the boss under some circumstances, emphasizing Chad, like that bastard. There's a lot of, people say that the communication is 80% nonverbal, 20% verbal. Nay, I tell you, that 80% nonverbal, that's the autoclitic stuff.
Wait, so
A lot of people with disabilities, and even a good many without, are not good at the autoclitic stuff.
So would my example of when I said, Lauren, can you hear the change in my tone of voice? Was that, and then I was like, Lauren, can you hear the change in
Well,
tone?
they were just modulating the thing.
got it.
That was
Okay.
more inflection.
You
Got it.
never define anything.
The body
You
language,
never,
right?
An operant isn't what it is because of that one instance and just the
Yeah.
topography. The operant
Okay.
is the relationship between the variables that get it to happen and what happens. So,
Got it.
no, that
You know-
was just changing your tone.
Okay.
We were talking last week or Tuesday about this more broader intervention of going into classrooms and things. And I think about some of these classrooms that we go into where you have multiple interfering behaviors, even with students without disabilities. But I think that thing that Ted is talking about, that autoclitic thing, being able to appropriately project the intent of your, the meaning of your words is a big thing. And a lot of kids, I think, miss cues and misread cues, especially from the teachers, but also from each other. And that's where I think we get a lot of problem behavior within the general education setting. So Lauren, I know you've targeted some different interventions for social skills. What are some of your go-tos for that? You've done the lunch bunch thing. You've done the.
Yeah, I've done the lunch bunch. You were witness to the lunch bunch.
I witnessed the lunch bunch. It wasn't bad. It was, it was you and a bunch of fifth graders. I mean, that's a tough, that's a tough
Tough
group.
crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah, fifth graders are they're tricky. They're also very judgy.
Yep.
The sass is real.
Yeah, the sass is real. And at that time, I was only working with children with autism, and to go to general education 5th grade, I was like, whoa, what has happened?
Switch.
Yeah, so that time I was kind of picking and choosing from Michelle Garcia Winner's had social thinking. That's what it is.
I'll write some notes.
And so I liked working with that curriculum, but it was very odd to work with that age group. That is definitely not the targeted group that it's for. But it's what we had. And so we kind of picked and chose and changed a couple things. Katie, I worked with social skills with your group
Yeah, absolutely.
quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. I think we targeted a lot of like, and Ted is going to kill me, the nonverbal aspects. Because your group, we had a lot of body proximity stuff. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Lots.
we talked a lot about that.
All
I
that's
think-
autoclitic.
What?
That's auto. You're right. That's autoclitic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a really good point, because a lot of kids struggle with that proximity component in social interactions, especially in some of the self-contained classrooms we work in. And it is a good point to emphasize that that's something that has to be worked on too, not just kind of the verbal exchange or the communication exchange that happens. But just,
And we were typically working also with occupational therapy at the same time. Like
Yeah.
we did a bunch of, like you guys planned a bunch of really cool activities that targeted the social stuff, speech stuff, OT stuff, and just, overall class management for me. So I would feel like the OT would because we were working on some fine motor things that might spill into the autoclitics. I don't know. Just wondering, like when they're communicating with each other.
There's a lot of fine motor involved in autoclitic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It used to be, typing all caps when you're doing an email, that's autoclitic.
Yeah.
Right? Times like, I'm angry, or this is really exciting, or pay attention to this. Autoclitic is also like tone of voice. You know how some people always sound angry no matter what they're saying? And I've had to work with some of my clients on that. What they're saying and the circumstances under what they're saying, and it's perfectly reasonable. But the way they say it makes everyone else really defensive because they sound really angry.
I get in a lot of
that's just their natural tone. And so,
Yeah.
tone of voice can be, voice volume can be, proximity, closeness to one or the other can be. There's a lot of stuff, anything, even a raised eyebrow. You raise an eyebrow when you say something, it changes the meaning of what you said, doesn't it? And it only changes the meaning if the other people, the other person, the listener, behaves differently with regard to that. If it doesn't change that person's behavior at all, you raised your eyebrow, but it had no effect. But, there's a lot of stuff that's verbal behavior. There's a lot of stuff that's autoclitic behavior that's not spoken. And this stuff that we're talking about, the pragmatics, that's all autoclitic behavior. And I think what's more helpful and useful to think about it as autoclitic behavior, once you understand what that is, rather than as pragmatics as a thing, is because, again, if you teach it as a thing, that presumes the person can take it out whenever they need it.
Mhm.
Or they remember where they put it. Or if they're like me, they remember the combination on the lock that they put on the cabinet or the shed, which I don't, so I have to saw it off. But, except the saw's inside the shed. But, when you think of it as a behavior, well, then it's a thing the person does under particular conditions. And if it's a thing the person does under particular conditions, okay, what are the conditions under which a person's going to need to do this and do it well? And then exactly what does it need to look or sound like when the person's doing it? Then I teach the person to do those things under those conditions. But this is a thing where Lunch Bunch falls apart. And Lauren, this isn't faulting you or anything. It's just
Nope.
anyone
Lunch
who's
Bunch
ever
is
been in a
really not my
situation
idea.
like that, this is where a lot of it falls apart. Because maintaining that autoclitic stuff, maintaining all those changes you're trying to bring about, depends on reinforcement from everyone else in natural environments, not in Lunch Bunch, right?
Yeah.
And so we can teach, hi, my name's Ted. What's your name? Let's be friends. And Lunch Bunch, and it works out really well. And I say that because I'm being a 5th grade boy, before things just then. But,
Right.
but
I got that.
you know, it may have called lunch bunch, but no one told the whole rest of the world that that's the right way to do it. You'll never catch any fifth grade boy who hasn't been in lunchbox doing it that way. So
Yeah.
instead of saying, "Oh, I'm Chad. Hey, what do you want to do?" So instead of handling it that way and reinforcing it, we're going to rip on the kid, and then he's going to become the kid with the funny voice, or he's going to become weird introduction kid or something, right?
Well,
So, yeah, and I'm not faulting you.
No.
No, it's tricky. It's a tricky thing to do.
It is, yeah. So speaking to voices, I think that's one thing, and we talked about a couple. I mean, Chad, you and I discussed when children have baby voices and they're reinforced. That's also part of that, where you've got to start shaping that behavior so it is more neurotypical, or not, shouldn't say neurotypical, but age appropriate, and their age and gender.
And we see that a lot happen with kids with developmental delays, right? That we've reinforced, especially mans, we've reinforced kind of this kind of baby talk. I mean, it's a maybe not the best way to say it. I don't know a more appropriate, but it's definitely not age appropriate. But we reinforce it because we allow that to access what they're trying to get. And on kind of the inverse of that, and I really kind of popped on what Ted said about having to work with some of his clients in how they say things.
Yeah.
Especially in the emotional, like the ED classrooms, emotional disabilities classrooms. Sometimes the kids are just trying to communicate and they haven't learned how to kind of change that tone of voice, change intonation, but we as teachers react more to the tone than we do what actually is being said.
Yes.
And we've got to remember, like Ted said, it's something that has to be worked on. It's just something that has to be taught. It's not that they can't do it, or they're kind of always being this cruel person or something, but it's just something they have to be instructed on, and we need to be mindful of that.
One thing I know I've worked on a lot with social skills is tone of voice and facial expressions, like what Ted was saying, raising the eyebrow, and practicing, like videoing the kids on an approved device, making sure the child, like, cover our ground.
Everything's legal.
But practicing, like, okay, this is what it looks like when you're angry, and this is what it looks like when you're, when you're really excited, and trying to shape that. And one thing I used this year a lot was having a couple of my older kids draw cartoons, like 3-step cartoon strips, where they had to like demonstrate in the cartoon how it looked. And then we practiced that. And it was kind of funny to see some of the things that would come up. But like just modulating your facial reaction, your tone of voice, where you're putting stress, like, are you putting a period or are you putting an exclamation point? That's really going to change how this looks.
I think though, like, and this is something for anybody listening out there, it's easy for us to be like, oh, well, this is just in the school setting. And I don't know if there's any teachers out there, but when you get in a disagreement with a spouse or anybody, how quickly does your teacher voice come out? Like that's what gets me in trouble so much. And he's like, my partner will just be like, I can't talk to you right now. Like, and like that, like you guys were saying, Ted, like that immediate defense. And I'm like, I'm not getting angry right now. And like I have like this, sit down. I am fine right now. I am so calm. Like I have this like teacher voice, and like my eyes are very like big and open. But I think it's important. Like, it's easy for us to talk about it with children and in the school setting, but if you do a little self-reflection, you're like, oh, that I too need to work on that. I think that's important for us to realize is that, outside of school, we're still learners, and we still need to be aware of that these social skills they're not just magically taught and just done on a daily basis once they're taught. Like it's a continual process and growth and everything, especially as we continue to grow and situations change. Like Ted was saying, it's not always going to be, hi, my name's Kate. Like it's going to change, in different developmental milestones of our life as well.
And I think that's also, Ted, you mentioned this on Tuesday, as the hidden curriculum is wonderful for laying that out. Because it's written in the sense of the person who's having those behaviors is going to read through it and like, oh, this is tips and cues.
Well, it's tips and cues, but I've read a lot of weight loss tips and cues, I've read a lot of tips and cues that have had nothing to do with, how I actually do things. So reading it's nice, but you actually have to do it, and that's a real pain. What I like about the hidden curriculum, and there are 4 versions of it now. There's the regular hidden curriculum. That's just called the hidden curriculum by Brenda Smith Miles. There's the hidden curriculum for elementary age kids, hidden curriculum for high school kids, and hidden curriculum at work. And so there are 4 of them. The beginning part of every book is kind of like how to teach, and that's nice and everything, but what I think is a whole lot more useful is like the last 3/4 or 2/3 of every book, which is kind of like, it's a list of a bunch of skills that that a lot of people just do. They haven't been explicitly taught, but we've learned them. The world has taught us to do this. But some people don't just learn this stuff as a function of navigating the world, and so it needs to be explicitly taught. But because of the nature of these things, because we were never explicitly taught them, and I'm looking for the books now so I could name a few, because we were never explicitly taught them, we kind of have to figure out what they are, because we don't know what they are. Okay, so what I found is...
Really quick, Ted, really quick. So before, for anyone out there, I think the stuff that Lauren is saying, like the resources that Lauren is giving and the resources that Ted are giving, if you don't catch them, we're going to make sure to put in the comments of the video on our Facebook page. We're going to give those list of resources for the ones that we're saying, yeah, look at this one, look at that one. So sorry, Ted, didn't want to interrupt. Just
okay. So this is from the hidden curriculum of getting and keeping a job, navigating the social landscape of employment. Now, I work with a gentleman who's been fired from a lot of jobs simply because when he interacts with people, regardless of circumstance and regardless of how he's actually feeling, he looks and sounds angry, and people get put off and people complain, and then he gets fired. So I had to work with him on that quite a lot. And we practiced it in an analog situation like Lunch Bunch, but it wasn't Lunch Bunch. And then I did with him what I did with my kids when they were younger. With my kids when they were younger, they actually fell for this. I told them, when their voices would start getting too loud, I would say, this is weird, my ears don't work. I can't hear you when you're this loud. I can only hear you when you talk quietly. And then I would actually, pretend like I couldn't hear them if they were talking too loud. My kids learned how to talk more quietly around me. Well, with this guy, it's weird. My ears can't hear you when you sound angry. Say it another way. And I had to prompt him a few times in the beginning, but after that, I don't get any of that anger nonsense with me. And we go out to a lot of public places and stuff, so he had an opportunity to practice it. So there we built the generalization here. But here, this is from Hidden Curriculum of Getting and Keeping a Job, Navigating the Social Landscape of Employment. And I'm on the part that talks about using transportation, getting to and from work. When finding a seat on the bus, it's expected that you will not sit next to a stranger if other seats are available. That's a big one. If there's only one other person on the bus and all the other seats are open, don't sit with that person. Don't sit necessarily right in front. Don't sit right in back. Choose a different seat. One that or if you find yourself routinely accepting rides from a friend or coworker, you should help pay for gas or show your appreciation by doing something nice in return, such as taking the person out for lunch or giving a small thank you gift. So it's things like this that we may not think about, we may just do, but these books are full of them. The one that I really wanted to find is the first book, just called The Hidden Curriculum, and I can't find it. It must be in my other office. And that one, it's pretty much just a list. Do this, do this, do this, this. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. One thing that I've had to teach a number of young men with disabilities is when you go into a public men's room, let's say, and you have to pee, and
You're going here.
I feel like there's rules that I wouldn't know.
Are you drawing a diagram, Ted?
There are more than 2 urinals, okay? Each of these is a urinal.
Oh yeah, this is a good one, yeah.
If someone's at this one, you don't go to this one or this one.
Right.
You go to this one.
And do you wait until other ones open up? Just wondering.
If you're gonna wait, if they're all full, if you're gonna wait, you don't stand in line right behind someone.
There's a proximity, distance.
Well, yeah, but I mean, so
I
Do
mean,
you
there
wait?
are places where you stand in line behind another gentleman, but that's a different kind of public restroom.
That's not what I meant.
If it's an odd number and someone's at this one, you don't go to this one. You go to
Right.
this one.
Right.
Now, if someone's at that one or that one, then of course you're going to go either here or
Oh, that's what I was asking. Like, do you wait or can you?
Yeah,
use
no,
it?
no, no. You
No,
use
no.
the open one,
Oh,
and you, yeah,
Wow.
Okay.
yeah.
I know,
This,
I
this
got it.
conversation's really
someone,
taking
open
a
eye-opening.
downward spiral.
someone, don't go to the open one.
Yeah.
next
I'm
to-
fascinated. Like, let's
Yeah, it's
Ted,
a
you
whole
took
new
up a
world.
really good
Teach
point
me.
out of this because
Knowledge.
we get, like, when we've done a lot of the webinars, you know, we tend to always, most of our backgrounds working with younger children, but like, what can we do for older kids? This is like good stuff, not just for kids with disabilities, but for secondary,
learning.
high school age kids, kind of learning things, just like the bus, the simplicity of the bus thing,
Adults
right?
who don't have disabilities, who have
Yeah,
relationship
absolutely.
difficulties.
Yeah. I mean, these are all social skills that we just kind of, like you say, we assume they've been learned, but sometimes they haven't. And you know, one of the things that conversations I've had with secondary teachers about behavior in their classrooms is just the motivation, right? Like a kid is more motivated. If he's getting a paycheck, he's going to be more motivated to kind of follow the rules and go along with the rules. So if you can tie the instruction that you're giving to kind of achieving that ultimate goal, I think we naturally assume that all these kids are going to sit and behave because they're in a class and that'll get them into college and that'll get them a job. But if we can make things more practical, like you're saying, that's an important thing. And I think just about every teenager should go through some type of curriculum like that, because as involved as we are on our phones and everything nowadays, I do think we've lost some of those interpersonal kind of cues and the things that are appropriate and things that aren't
Well, and
appropriate.
there's a whole host of other. It's a whole other language through texting, though. I mean, there are other cues that are important to learn, and when do we teach those?
I'm just
Eye contact is something that definitely, and like putting down your phone, like it's not appropriate to be like this and answering questions, because eye contact is such a huge portion of any pragmatic language.
Well, and
So
which
has-
emoji to not send to your mom. That's important.
Yeah.
Although your mom
That is
may not-
important.
But what I've had to do a few times since all of this working from home and my delightful home office began is I've caught a couple of my clients either gaming or doing schoolwork or something else online while they're talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this because they're typing stuff. And I said, dude, you're typing and we're just having a conversation. You don't need to type. What's that about? He's like, oh, I'm doing my homework. Click out of that. We'll keep talking when you click out of that. But Lauren, you're right. You know, socially, the way things have evolved for these younger generation, these whippersnappers, is that, you know, your face is in the phone or your face is in whatever, or you're typing while you're talking to someone.
Exactly.
Sorry, I'm your expensive therapist, okay?
Yeah.
You're paying me. I'm going to do my job. Get off that other thing.
Well, even I fall definitely. I can't say I never do that, because I'll be on the phone with my mother, and if she's listening, I apologize. And she'll be talking, and I'll be doing something online, Amazon, doing anything.
Anything.
As soon as you hear that, yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
my mom's
And
listening.
hear that
There she is, and I'm
that it's very vague language, and oftentimes you get that with children that don't understand something, or you get that with patients that have Alzheimer's, and they're just trying to stay involved in the situation, but they're not cued in on what the conversation is. And I think that's important to practice, having those involved questions in those comments and demonstrating TED, expressive and receptive language.
Oh no! Wait, no, I'm just
I
kidding.
have a question. I have a question about the eye contact. Okay,
Yeah.
and I'm asking because I don't know, and I have a Zoom room full of people that are very smart and could know this answer. So, you know, a lot of people say, you know, like, oh, they're not showing eye contact, so it's probably autism. Like, you know, we've all heard it before.
Yeah.
But now we're in a generationally, there's generations of people that don't give eye contact. So, You know what I mean? Like, where's the line that we're going to say, like, or do we see possibly like this presumed symptom or whatever of lack of eye contact as something within autism, because now everybody's kind of displaying this because of what, I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
I think we still teach it because it is still useful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But we need to take into consideration cultural variables sometimes.
Yes, that's what I was going to
Yeah, because there are, where I live, we have people from all over the world, and it's wonderful. But women in some cultures will not make eye contact with men.
Right.
Mhm.
And so, you know, one of these ladies is cashier at the supermarket that I can walk to from my store or from my house. And, you know, she's friendly and everything, but she has yet to make eye contact. And she's been there for 9 years. Well, that's the way it goes. I'm not going to change that,
Yeah.
you know. But it is the case, though, that just because we have a lot of socially unskilled neurotypical adults, it doesn't mean that we let others suffer the same fate. You know, at least I hope that these now bad eye contact adults at one time in their lives had good eye contact, and maybe that's what got them to where they were now before they had their face in their phone all the time. Because
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys remember the before times, but these didn't exist.
Before time.
I remember, Ted.
I remember.
I do. I was small, but
Yeah.
But
Order to the mall.
Were we in
So-
diapers,
so-
Ted?
the
I
difference
had to
is
put in middle school.
that a lot of those adults were doing the really good, useful eye contact when they needed to when they were younger, which got them to where they are now.
Well, and I
But
think
we're kind of limiting opportunities if we let this generation of kids who never make eye contact evolve, because, you know, the people who are older like me, who may be hiring them or teaching them or in other ways, you know, have some sort of authority, some sort of influence on their future, we're going to think they're rude and they don't care and they just don't pay attention, and we'll
Well, and I
choose
think-
the house.
I think it's important too, like for even myself, like, I mean, I didn't get my first cell phone until I was a freshman in high school, and we still had the dial up, the internet computer. But I think, you know, even now, because I have just become so accustomed to this thing, when I do go into social settings, like I do have to tell myself, you need to put your phone away, Kate.
Yeah.
You need to, like, and sometimes I even, like when I'm talking, I look down often just because I don't know why. Lauren, Ted, somebody out there, you can maybe tell me. But after like 30 seconds, I recognize it myself and I'm like, oh, Kate, you need to look up. And it's uncomfortable for me because I'm not used to really looking at people a whole lot of times. But I mean, I think that's an excellent, we have to teach ourselves, and we also have to eventually figure out those cues so that we're doing it independently. And it's just something I just like, that always got to me as a teacher when someone, you know, parents would be like, do they give you very much eye contact? They don't give me very much eye contact. Do you think it's autism? And I would always respond like, well, I really don't think it's my place to make that decision. I think it's important that, you know, you seek support from your doctor and looking at there's other things for that. Yes, Ted, please answer.
Well, and maybe
Not
they
being
should seek support from
diagnosing
the doctor, because what if they're not looking for them because they have a massive goiter? You know, who wants the kids being polite and not staring at the parent's massive goiter? So yes, send them to the doctor.
So that's what I would always say, but it would frustrate me because I'd also be like, you know, we also are like, our children are being handed technology, unfortunately, at a super young age. Like, Chad,
And even
I'm sure,
more
like,
so now with the
I'm
school.
sure a
I mean,
1-year-old would
with
know. Chad, I'm really sorry, but I think a 1-year-old probably knows how to share start a watch party on Facebook because they were given it like at 3 months or something.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's exaggerating, but I just think it's something that we need to be mindful of with the whole eye contact thing, because immediately for so long that was a myth, like, oh, there's no eye contact, so they must be on the
two
spectrum or
things for me about the eye contact. I mean, the first one is it's kind of like reading a book. If you're teaching reading, you can't actually teach reading unless there is a visual gaze, right? That discrete skill of gazing down to, and that's one of the reasons why I do think when we start working with kids, especially at a very young age, we work on that discrete skill of looking and orientating a visual glance. But going back to kind of just reading cues and things, if you're not engaging with your eyes when you're having that interpersonal experience, then you're not able to read that other person's expressions. And we don't always carry all of our meaning in our tone. And I think about emails. Like emails are a really good example of not making eye contact, right? How many times have you misread an email, or you've kind of put tone to an email that maybe wasn't there because you can't see the speaker's face, you can't hear the speaker's tone. Yeah.
Texting.
So it's kind of that same way. But the only thing that I would caution, because I do think it's extremely important to teach eye contact, but not at the expense of creating problem behavior. So I have seen teachers kind of not allow that to be shaped, and they're just looking for an immediate, the kid doesn't make any eye contact, to he's going to make eye contact and sustain it. That's something that has to be shaped. You can't force comply the eye contact.
Yeah.
So,
I think one thing I've seen a lot is goals, IEP goals for eye contact.
yeah.
Well,
And I think that's really hard because that there's no
This is what they have to
on
do.
the child.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
You said
Go ahead,
10
jump in,
seconds,
Ted.
right?
Ted, jump in.
1, 2,
Oh, their eyelids.
three.
We can't do
Done.
that.
I met the goal.
Let Ted jump in. He's got his hand
the
raised.
thing about eye contact, though, is it's like sitting at the table. It's like remaining seated. You have to give a person reason to do that. You have to make that reinforcing circumstance. You have to make eye contact the vehicle through which reinforcement is delivered. You can't force it. And maybe you could physically prompt it. You can prompt the eyes open. I really wouldn't recommend it. You're going to set up a lot of nasty situations. But, this is why children's books in the beginning, I have a lot of books up here, and most of them are like this. All words, no pictures. Isn't that boring? But when my kids were younger and I had a ton of children's books for them, it was all pictures and no words. And they weren't black and white pictures, and they weren't pictures of garden tools and, graphs and stuff. They were pictures of stuff that's interesting to kids, So the books themselves were full of what was likely to be reinforcing stimulation if the kids look down there. It's colorful, it's fun, it's interesting, it's friendly. And you pair that with the parents, how the parent feels, the parent tickling you, the parent holding you, the parent talking to you, the parent's animated voice and everything. As the parent's reading you the book or telling you stories from the book, you create the book as the reinforcer. You've just made this instructional material a reinforcer, so the kid's likely to look at it. The kid may well go get it off the shelf himself and sit and turn pages. We do the same thing with eyes. When I'm teaching eye contact, I don't do any look at me trials, because in my almost 60 years, no one has said, look at me, and what followed wasn't punishment, So, we only get look at me when something bad's going to happen. The way I teach look at me with my early learners who don't do eye contact is I deliver the reinforcers from up here. And some say don't do it, but I'll tell you, it's worked for me every single time. So kid has to look up here, which is in the proximity of my eyes. I just get him looking up here. Then I wait until his eyes come over here for a split second. And then I wait until he's doing this and all of that. I pair my eyes and my face with reinforcement.
Well, and I think not only pairing your eyes, but I'm sorry, Kate, but also just yourself, making yourself engaging to that kid. I think that's such a huge thing. Sorry, Kate. Go ahead.
That's fine. I mean, a specific example of this, we were working with a kid this year, and we were working on tacting cards, I think. And we did a couple of different trials where we started where it was at the table, and then we ended up having the reinforcer near the card, near our face. And we were directly across from the kid. And then we saw all of a sudden, he was getting yeses instead of no's for a bunch of tacks. So it was cool because I didn't think about it. And then it was like, boom. Oh. Yeah. And so, it can be powerful.
We're kind of running down towards, I had a question that's kind of want to pull everybody. What do you think is the most appropriate starting point? If we're working on social interactions with children with deficits, starting with adult-child interactions or peer-to-peer interactions?
Is this just open for all of us?
Yeah, everybody. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a poll. We're polling.
Oh, we're polling. Okay.
But Ted has his hand raised, so.
Yeah, I'm going to ruin it and say both. And the way I would do it is you just have the peers deliver non-contingent reinforcement, have the adults deliver non-contingent reinforcement.
All right, I'm
You
gonna go
know,
in the order of the screen.
Okay,
Well,
make
it
peers
might be
important,
different.
make adults important.
Yeah, Katie.
Okay, yeah, it's different for all of us.
Okay, well,
Okay. Yeah, I think both are highly important. I think if you absolutely had to pick one under like a death condition, I would think adult, just because it for safety. You should listen to adult if they say stop. You should listen to adult that if they say like don't run into the street. You know, just for safety. I'm thinking like lower functioning kids. I would think we would want to start with adults, and then generalize to.
I would say adult as well, but you have to almost engage in a childlike manner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you can't just be knee to knee saying, hey, we're going to work on this very discrete skill. It's got to be more naturalized. It can't be in a true, like, you might have to. Sorry, guys. I have a call coming in.
How rude.
Wow.
Mine is but it's definitely something that it has to be in a childlike manner, and to it like playing it cannot be at a table a lot of time. I mean, I should say it can be, but oftentimes play-based therapy are the best times to teach these skills.
Kate.
I mean, I struggled with it because I side with Ted on that it needs to be both. But if I had to, like Katie said, pick only one, I differ because I would think peer.
Yeah.
Because, and I think like, I go with peer just because, I think of what's the game of ABA, and we're trying to, we're looking towards social significance and independence. And
That's
I think,
true.
and I don't want, and I think, if we always have that, that adult, we look at dependency.
And Lauren, where I would differ with what you said is the childlike manner thing, because if we are prioritizing listening to an adult in terms of a safety thing, and that adult is modeling acting like a child, does the child have the ability, that particular child, if we're working at that level with the kid, can they discriminate between the adult as an authority figure versus the adult as kind of a play figure? And I think that's something that needs to be kept in mind when you start talking about that.
Well, you have, in order to get to that authoritative figure, you have to pair with a child.
Pair.
You have
So that's,
right.
like, I'm not saying get on the carpet and let's talk like babies and like regress.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's got to be, you've got to pair the child. Like if you're going to teach these skills, you can deliver reinforcement and deliver directives and discuss and like have these micro discussions about these in an activity that's reinforcing to the child.
Right. It's how when we go to a classroom, it's how we discuss in pivotal response training that leads to instructional control. Yeah.
But what I was kind of emphasizing was you had said do it in a childlike manner, and
okay, yes.
I don't think that the adult should model a childlike manner, because I think there still needs to be the instructional condition of the adult, and that's why I think that you've got to start on some level with the peers, because especially at that age, kids learn so much quarterly, both visually and verbally. But my point for asking this was, and we all push in and work in self-contained classroom environments. And if the environment is only full of children with social deficits and significant disabilities, how do you get that peer-to-peer modeling? And you've really got to advocate as a special education teacher and be creative about getting good models. One of the reasons why we spent a lot of time in ED classrooms, self-contained ED classrooms, and the only model for behavior for these students that have significant behaviors is other students with significant behavior, right? So the inclusive model is just so important when we start talking about social skills. And I do think it's an interesting question, because we see, I know me personally, I think all of you could probably relate to this. I've seen kids that have gotten 12, 13, 14 years old, and the only effective social interactions they have are with caregivers and adults.
Yeah.
Because that's never been worked on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's something we forget about, I think, because it's too easy kind of within the self-contained to just kind of keep everything within those walls. So
yeah, it's got to be taught. I feel like that's when you see like fights on the playground, because a child with an ED label might not know how to respond to losing a game, things like that. But it's really important to learn in that condition. I think we would normally start with PE or recess, things like that would make the most sense. But because it's more motivating.
So I have a question, because it's about that time for us to maybe look at, because we do have some comments on our Facebook page. Which is
wow,
awesome.
cool.
And I think we have some comments that maybe we can just present as questions just to make sure, because I know they were discussed, but just to clarify. But before we jump on that, I want to ask a question about going back to the goal that we talked at the very beginning of this webinar, Zoom, I don't know, Facebook feed live. So Ted, and I'm not questioning it, I just want clarification because this is something that has come up often. The student will exercise effective self-management behavior in difficult situations on 90% of observed situations.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question for that is, ethically, within our realm, can we put a child in quote unquote difficult situations? And then what would we, like, is it important that within the IEP that they define what a difficult situation is? Because difficult's very subjective. So it's like, what maybe, and also just like, do we also define what those self-management
Like strategies are?
And I'm just asking because these are goals that we often see. And if I saw that, I'd be like, I don't know what self-management are, and I don't know what difficult is. So I think it's just important to have those conversations, maybe at an IEP meeting, to clarify.
Sure. And for this kid, you know, we know what the self-management behaviors are. I know the ones that I've been teaching. And the difficult situations, fortunately for this kid and for many kids, you don't have to engineer them because they present themselves multiple times every day. These are why these kids end up in the predicaments they end up in, right?
Yeah.
Someone upsets them. With my kid, it was work getting more difficult or him making a mistake. I've worked with kids who, if they have to erase something, they flip out.
Yeah.
If they make a mistake, they flip out. If they get something wrong, they flip out. You know, and so what I do with them is we practice making mistakes and being okay. First, we practice being okay. We get really good at being okay. And then I'm going to make a mistake on purpose and then be okay. I'm going to make a mistake on purpose, not be okay, not be okay, and have the kid tell me if I'm doing it right or not doing it right. If I'm being okay when I've made a mistake. I have the kid critique my performance first. Then I want the kid to make a mistake on purpose and be okay. And we practice making a mistake on purpose and being okay a lot of times in those situations, because what I'm doing, even though it's on purpose, he's making a mistake and he's being okay. And then as I'm working with him in his work, as mistakes come up, I either watch and see him managing well, and I say, dude, you're doing a great job. You're being okay. Or if it looks like we're about to get there, I say, remember, let's be okay.
Yep.
And either way, you know, if you can name it, and if the kid's facile with it, you can prompt it.
Yeah.
That's what I love about that. And I go with simple names that mean something to that kid.
Well, and what I love too about that is, again, we're going back to the simple word of it has to be taught. And in the moment, we're not going to be teaching this skill. But I also think it's important that a lot of time, I don't want to say a lot, but because I don't want to over predict, but oftentimes we see that situations aren't created naturally. Like, teachers will do anything and everything so that this situation doesn't happen, because it's like, we don't want to upset the bear. Does that make sense?
Right.
So it's important that, you know, we're in a classroom setting. That's the natural environment. Things are going to be difficult at times, and it's important that they understand what's our reaction going to be.
Right.
I think it's great that, you know, you taught prior to, of course, you know, things might happen 10 minutes later after teaching that, and it happens because that's the classroom. But I think that's just important to remember is, you know, difficult situations are going to happen, and it's not doing anybody a service to not let those things naturally happen. But it's important that we teach how to respond to it. So, thank you. That's what I just wanted to clarify, because I think it's important. So going to the questions, we have Chad. Cami says she appreciates that she's not the only one with tech issues. And then we have a parent out here that is saying, you know, I was confused. She has a she has a daughter with high functioning autism, and she gets really confused with the IEP process at times with the goals. And she says, my daughter usually does not pick up on the emotional cues such as angry tones, but when she does, she goes into overload and has a complete meltdown. And she believes that the speech and OT are really helping her with this. I guess just to clarify, we had talked, Ted, you had done an excellent example of like, I can't understand you when you're using this angry tone.
Or I can't hear you. And
Oh, I
then
can't hear you.
Yeah,
That's right.
can't hear you.
I
Yeah.
can't hear you.
Yeah. So I think, for this parent out there, with, you're probably experiencing this at home too, because home is the new school, maybe modeling some of that behavior. Like, I can't hear you when you're angry.
Well, although really, we have to be careful with giving prescriptive advice for someone we've never met.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
So merely a general suggestion,
Yes.
not advice to follow and sue us over.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please don't sue us. Yeah.
Newbie alert. Yeah.
This would be prescriptive advice.
No,
Yeah.
there is no advice going out there. It was just a general statement of, if you're experiencing this problem, anybody and everyone, this is something to maybe
Go
consider.
to an appropriate professional. Yes.
Yes,
This is
seek out
not
the
a
support.
fiduciary relationship.
Yes, thank you, Ted. I appreciate you
Welcome.
covering me.
Yeah, I mean, we see, especially with the high functioning autism, we had a couple cases we worked on directly this year at the high school level where you had that issue that everybody just kind of accepted the tone. Everybody accepted the comments coming out and didn't take the time to model and to teach. So I think the very broad response is, again, it's just something that has to be learned. We have to teach these things, and we need to be very mindful of our reactions to it, because especially whether we're a caregiver, a parent, a teacher, BCBA, an OT, a speech pathologist, our reactions to those kind of projections are going to shape ultimately whether or not they continue or don't continue.
Because
I mean,
that's
it's
the
funny 'cause
consequence of the behavior.
Yeah, Katie and I had a question about a child that he only yelled to his parents the other day, or yesterday, I think it was, when he came home from school. He would only yell to them. And it's something quite common. You and I work with a kid directly, and he responds a lot of times with growls and grunts and things. And
Yeah, I think
we
not
have a very
providing
different reaction.
enforcement to that, you're not giving him what he wanted, not letting him, not interacting, not answering a question he may have, or not providing the good job, you're right. Like, only reinforce when it's said in the appropriate way.
And also
Yeah.
practicing it when it's not happening.
Yes.
Mhm.
Laying those
Well,
foundations.
that's why I love what Ted says. Yeah, like recognizing what okay looks like, right? Like,
So modeling those prior to the child, like being upset and yelling.
Yeah.
Never the time to first try it.
We want to reinforce when the good things are happening before we have to not reinforce the bad.
And not just modeling, but when the kid is actually being okay, you need to get the kid to pay attention to what that feels. And this is difficult for some, and it requires even more teaching. And for some, you're not going to get there. So just do the best you can. But it's you got to know what your facial musculature feels like, so you can make your face relax, how your voice sounds, how your shoulders feel, how everything feels, so that you can be okay. So that in the midst of stuff, you can do that thing you were doing and be okay. And that requires a level of awareness that we have to teach sometimes.
And we have to practice that ourselves when there's like big maladaptive behaviors. And we talked about it in other webinars, but we have to practice lowering our own heart rates and, making sure our tones aren't being sassy. Because if we're modeling that we are okay and that we are calm and that things can return to baseline, that's way more helpful than, raising our own voices. Why aren't you calming down? It's like, well, I'm not calm. Like, why we can't expect a student to be calm when we are not ourselves.
Yeah, you
So
can't
think-
stop yelling while yelling that at a student.
Calm down.
So thinking of like,
Doesn't work well.
I think thinking of we're talking to a lot of teachers out there, and we're saying, it's important for us to teach. And they're just like, probably, a good majority of those teachers are like, okay, rolling their eyes. When am I supposed to teach this? Like,
Right.
how am I supposed to teach this? I have X, Y, and Z that still needs to be done. Like, we don't have this social block of time. Right. But I think that this could be something, I think of elementary, this could be done in your stations.
Yeah.
Like
Carpet time. I mean, this
is a carpet. You could do this as a whole group with carpet time. And for the students that, you recognize maybe are struggling a bit more with it, you can do that intervention, that, you know, tier 2 intervention, where you work with them a little bit more in small group. And, you know, if you recognize they need a little bit more, then we move into that tier 3. But I think it's important that, you know, we don't have to have speech teacher to do this. You can, oh no, I'm just messing up today. You don't need to have a speech therapist. I'm just messing up. But anyway, I just think that's important. You know, think about, if you're appreciating stuff that we're saying, think, you know what, how could I put this in my rotations of my language arts time, or, you know, during our whole group carpet, how can I embed this in there some form or fashion?
And talk to your IAs on how they could even deliver it when they're working one-on-one or when in their groups. So it could be targeted throughout the entire day.
Yeah, or even like just non-contingently, like, oh, I love how you're having an open body right now.
Well,
like,
The whole day
that's
is
something we don't do enough now.
Yes.
The whole day is social. The whole day involves being around other people when you're at school. Even when you're working by yourself, there are other people present. You got to conduct yourself appropriately.
Yeah.
So the whole day is just full of opportunities.
Yeah, you don't have to have this set time to collect data on social goals every day. Like,
and even as a general ed classroom teacher, I mean, when I first started working in elementary schools, we, at the very beginning of the year, practiced social skills. Like, we practiced lining up, we practiced walking in line, we practiced going to the bathroom. We did all these things. But I think about all the, like Ted said, all the naturally occurring social interactions that happen throughout the course of the day for a kid. And if you're a teacher, think about how often do you walk up to that kid at the lunch table that's just sitting there eating his lunch quietly and say, hey, you're doing a great job. We are so much more attentive to problem behavior than we are to good behavior. And when you step back from your classroom and really look at it, there are more good things happening in your classroom than there are bad things happening in your classroom. And if you can shift your mindset a little bit and kind of be more vigilant about paying attention to those things and really letting those things occupy your attention, it will serve as that instructional model that we're talking about for teaching these social skills. Even on the playground, it's such a natural condition. I've been on the playground, I've seen a kid let another kid take a turn. That's a great time to reinforce. It was a natural thing that just occurred, but we're more likely to give attention to the kid that didn't let the person take a turn than we are to the kid that did, and reinforce the behavior that we want. So just something to keep in mind. It's not that it has to be this massive scope and sequence and, you know, dictated by the VDOE and or wherever Department of Education you're working with, but it's something that can happen and should happen very naturally. So
I would also
Ted, I
say
saw your hand raiser.
Oh, no, it's down. It's down.
Oh, it's down. Okay, sorry.
a lot of schools have morning meetings, and I think that's a really good time to lay out, like, hey, today we're going to be working on this, and like just point out throughout the day, like, oh, I really loved how you're doing what we're working on from that morning meeting.
So Lauren, with some of those, because I know it's about that time, but with those, with new teachers, you know, this isn't something that's taught very often in colleges. Would you suggest, like, you know, it's okay to branch out of your classroom or your hallway and maybe go sit down with your speech therapist and just say, hey.
Yeah, highly recommend that. And even have the speech therapist, I can't even talk, the speech therapist come in and maybe run like a morning meeting, or just like one of your break times, like have them come in and discuss basic stuff, but definitely sit down with your speech therapist, talk to them about how you can just put little like social curriculum nuggets.
I love that.
That was huge for me when in my classroom, she's basically modeling how to reinforce certain, how to deliver certain things for me throughout the day. So like I learned a lot just watching her run certain groups. And so, yeah, that's hugely important.
So to new teachers out there, just little helpful tips, you know, there's a ton of resources at your school. And so it might be nice to, if you're feeling unsure, especially I say from experience as a certified general education K through 12 special ed teacher, I had no idea. And it wasn't until I went out of my comfort zone and was like, hi, I'm Kate. I need help and I talked to my speech therapist about it.
All right, guys, we are way over, and I know Ted's got places to go, and
he's just so popular.
People to see. He is a popular guy. So thanks for joining us on the Social Skills Week, guys. Next week, we're talking about augmentative communication, so I'm sure we'll see Lauren back at some point. And then the week after that, we're going to talk about this relationship or this assumed relationship between sensory and behavioral stuff. So we've got a couple good weeks coming up for you. And I know in the third week, Kate had come up with a great idea to talk more about IEP goals and academics versus behaviors and things like that. So got some good topics for you. With that, I'll say goodbye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah,
Bye, everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you soon.